if you see the world scenario, nearly 60 to 70% of the world power is produced using steam, and that steam is produced in boilers using fossil fuels. Predominantly, it is coal, and to an extent, even natural gas is being used or is being promoted nowadays as a working fluid. There's quite a bit of hydropower generation where it is possible throughout the world, and people are now looking for an alternative or natural sources for energy. Firstly, they think of solar. Solar has got few issues, as you all know. I don't want to go into details of that one. Then wind, then tidal, geothermal, and all. Every possible renewable energy source is being looked at. But then, but having said that one, the market share of renewable energy is still not to an extent where you can say it is fully competitive with the conventional power. Both from cost point of view, the convenience, and turn on the switch and you have the electricity. We haven't gone to that stage yet, whether it's wind or solar or geothermal, any of these things. Because there are some from fluctuation, the steadiness, stability, and reliability are still not completely established as per conventional electrical power. Normally, in conventional electrical power, it's actually either steam is, like I said, the steam is working fluid which works in a Rankine cycle. Are there any alternatives? Now, with the same heat source, technically you can operate with any working fluid. Why it only steam? You can work with air, you can work with any of the so-called refrigerants also are good organic Rankine cycle working fluid. So what is really the speciality of carbon dioxide as a power generation system? First and foremost thing, it has got the same advantage what we discussed about in the morning regarding the refrigeration. The main advantages of carbon dioxide, whether it's refrigeration or power generation, are the following. First and foremost is a natural fluid like water. So is water, so is air. It is non-toxic, non-flammable. In modern terms, we can also call it a green fluid for both refrigeration and air conditioning applications. Simple systems, but somewhat higher operating pressures than normal that we have seen in the morning. So that we'll see that the pressures which you are talking about in carbon dioxide is actually much greater than this 100 bar, which I was talking about in the morning. And they're really energy efficient because thermophysical and thermal properties are very favorable for us. And especially it is an all-weather fluid carbon dioxide. Small charge emitters because very high density and specific work, these things are more. Reduced pipeline diameters because of high densities we have seen. This is common for all because it's common as carbon dioxide as working fluid. It is refrigeration or power generation. And it is really an answer to climate change, global warming people have been talking about. However, with all these advantages of so far, how many carbon dioxide based power generation systems have we seen in the world? Actually, they don't exist anymore. In fact, there is a lot of emphasis on using carbon dioxide power generation, even in nuclear power. Instead of steam, you can use carbon dioxide. Any working fluid, when it is heated and expanded from higher enthalpy to lower enthalpy, it should produce power. But it's not that simple with steam, with carbon dioxide, because a lot of hardware are necessary, a lot of heat exchange equipment, the compressors, expanders, everything have got to be developed. A lot of research and development needs for improvement and standardization, which also I mentioned in the morning. That's one of the reasons why CO2 refrigeration cycles haven't really gone at the rate at which people would have liked. Although today we are talking about 10,000 refrigeration system being replaced. It's not. Whereas when it comes to question of carbon dioxide power generation, it is even much less so. So what are the options available? Here we have got the pressure enthalpy diagram, which you have seen in the morning, a similar one. What are the various options available? One, power generation is possible either with the Rankine cycle or a Brayton cycle. In a Rankine cycle, we need actually condensation of the working fluid that is coming out of the turbine, and also pumping it to the higher pressure. And also you require a heat source. Normally for water, it is the fossil fuel is the heat source. In the case of carbon dioxide or air, any of the gas, which can be still a fossil fuel, It can be geothermal energy, it can be solar energy, and wherever heat energy is available, you can just use it. Now let us look at the various options that we have got. Here you have got the pH diagram. I have drawn various isotherms here. This is 30 degrees isotherm, 100 degrees, 200 degrees, 400 degrees isotherm, these dotted lines. Number one, I can operate completely in a Brayton cycle in subcritical. This is a critical point, completely in a subcritical point. This is a Brayton cycle. You got two isentrops and two isobars. This is actually compression work, heat addition, expansion in a turbine, and also this is the heat rejection. That is, the entire thing is below the critical point. I can have a transcritical, that is going above the critical point, but only thing is it's a transcritical because it's operates partly above the critical point, partly below the critical point. Transcritical, but there is no condensation or anything is wrong. That is the purple line here. Then in the transcritical, I can also have some kind of a condensing cycle. Like for example, like this is what I call as Rankine-Brayton cycle. Here, it is pumped. The condensed carbon dioxide is pumped to a higher pressure. More or less, the enthalpy change, although I have shown it, the enthalpy change is almost very small for a pump. That's exactly the reason why we pump a liquid. Then we do the heat addition, then expand it in a turbine. Then actually heat rejection occurs to an extent. Then whatever is remaining, you reject it in the condenser for the that is transcritical condensing cycle. This is transcritical non-condensing cycle. Then there is another possibility. We can operate the entire cycle in what is called a supercritical region. That is in this region. There is supercritical carbon dioxide. In addition, we also have a combined cycle, which is Rankine, trans, and everything together. Quite a bit operates under subcritical. You see, what happens is part of the compression takes place in the compressor. Then the second stage compression, instead of compressing, because as you know, the compressor takes substantial amount of work from the turbine. In fact, you can see the amount of enthalpy change here is significantly, slightly small, significantly large fraction of the. But this is what actually the turbine gives. And this is what actually compressor takes. So what you have got coming out of your, which you can sell and make money, is the difference between this and this. That is actually quite small here. Now, in order to make this work small, what I can do part of the compression here, then actually condense it. This is actually you de-superheat and then condense it. The condensed fluid actually I can pump. The condensed fluid actually can be pumped up, then do the heat addition. So then you are not obliged, because you are condensing, you are not obliged with the large expansion ratios. You also know that Brayton cycles, I got limited compression, or what we call the expansion ratio, somewhere between 6 and 15 or something like that. Whereas in steam, you can expand to very large ratios, because steam, the inlet pressure to a turbine can be as high as 200 bar. And as you know, outlet pressure is about few kilopascals, and maybe typically about 30 or 40 kilopascals. So it's a huge compression ratio possible with water. Similarly, when you do this one, that is transcritical partial condensing, partial compression, that's a Brayton cycle, you can go in for a large expansion ratio. So larger the expansion ratio, more is the work output. So you can see the amount of enthalpy change that you can get here is substantially large compared to enthalpy change in the compression, plus the pump work, which is actually quite small. So how many options we have got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options we have got. So again, like in refrigeration, we got various combinations. Here also we got various combinations through which power can be generated. Let's look at a simple Brayton cycle with the regenerator. It's exactly the same as what you find for any Brayton cycle with any working fluid. What do you have in a Brayton cycle? You have a compressor. Of course, this is a closed system Brayton cycle. Then the compressor gives the heat, discharges the high pressure gas, and there is a regenerator which actually part of the heat rejected from the compressor is recovered here. Then you put it through the heat exchanger, where you can have a heat transfer fluid transferring heat to the working fluid. Then the high pressure and high temperature gas is actually expanded through a turbine. Still, the tail has got quite a bit of thermal energy that's recoverable. You can't actually expand it beyond a particular region because of the limitations of the compressor. And then you use a regenerator. Anyway, there has to be heat has got to be added to the air coming out of the compressor. You recover that heat from the expansion unit, and remainder of the heat is actually rejected in the gas cooler. Then it comes back to the condenser. So we have a good system of typical small Brayton cycle with regeneration. Next, what we have is another representation of air-based Brayton cycle. So we can see on the TS diagram, temperature entropy diagram, this 1, 2, 1, 2 is the compressor, air is being taken from out, 1, 2 is the compression, ideal compression, but real compression will be 1, 2 prime because the isentropic efficiency of no compressor is 100%. Then actually there is a constant pressure heat addition, isobaric heat addition. Here I have drawn a dotted line that shows that there will be a certain amount of pressure drop of the pipeline because of the viscosity of the fluid. Then we have got expansion from 4 prime to 5 prime. This again is not really isentropic because there will be a slight increase in entropy. From 5 to say 6, there is a heat recovery is possible. This is the regenerator, but is coming through here. But because being let out, a part of it heat is regenerated between 5 and 6, and rest of it actually goes out. The heat addition between 3 and 4 actually occurs in this particular case in a solar power tower. So you can have this, or you can have in conjunction with it, you can have conventional fuel burning or biomass as a fuel addition. You can also operate. You cannot operate a carbon dioxide expansion cycle, the power generation cycle, using even in the biomass. Any heat source is good. It can be geothermal energy. It can be solar energy. But only thing is, later on we'll see the temperatures you require are substantially large. So this is the temperature entropy diagram. This is a schematic diagram. Now, the closed loop Brayton cycle, because argon in the carbon dioxide will be in a closed loop inside cycle. This we have the pH chart, what we saw in the morning. So what are the components of it here? Same as what we have seen earlier. Instead of the fossil fuel heat exchange, we have got a solar receiver, which is comes in because of a power tower concept. So heat is being added here. Now you've got the compressor here. Compressor, the air comes out of the compressor. This is recuperator, regenerator. Regenerator is going to the heat source, and the heat source it goes to the turbine. And the turbine is expanded. Whatever heat is left out in the tail, it is again collected here, and again the air goes back here. And the expander, part of this is actually closed loop Brayton cycle because there is no in the earlier case we have seen it was an open loop where air was being drawn from outside and then let out to that. In the case of carbon dioxide, we don't have to do that, but it can be a closed cycle. How does it work? On a schematic diagram, this is actually completely subcritical operation. And you have the heat, the compression process is taking place in 2 stages. We've got 1, 2 compression. Then there's a subcooling there, bringing back to the same temperature it was originally. Then actually you compress again in the second stage. Then you do the heat addition, constant pressure, then you expand it. So this is where your useful work is coming out. And the compression work goes in here and here. There are 2 heat exchangers. One is here, one is heat is being added here. Okay. Now, with the receiver, what are the basic features of this one? You need a receiver. Later on, we'll see that with carbon dioxide, you require substantially high temperatures for operation, somewhere between 800 to 1000 degrees. And of course, the efficiency will be much higher too as compared to normal steam cycle. These cycles have an efficiency of almost pretty close to about 50%. The closed loop Brayton cycle, more efficient with compressor intercooler generator because there has to be, whenever you're going for a 2-stage system, always there has got to be an intercooler because isentropic compression always adds heat, which at mean temperature will go up. Then the cycle do not need a bottoming was the cycle because what normally happens is that the gas that is coming out of the unit gas cooler, it still has got certain amount of heat which you can use it for working another Rankine cycle, which with on the organic Rankine cycle basis. because this is the overseas have got very small, poor efficiencies of somewhere between 5 and 10%. So energy storage is possible using thermal energy storage, because again, if you are using sun, you have to have the energy for the night. So you got to look at some alternate sources for energy. Because some solar energy to an extent can be stored, but beyond that one, what one has to do is only use the conventional fuels or any other source of fuel. Safe operation as no hazards of flammable fluids are used. Now, what does it look like? Various on the TS diagram. This is actually simple, say, rather supercritical carbon dioxide Brayton cycle. Is actually drawn to scale. So we have 1 to 2 compression, then 2 to 3 heat addition, 3 to 4 expansion in a turbine, 4 to 1 again heat rejection. Now, this certain amount of heat recovery is possible when it actually when it's the hot gas. You can see this is coming out temperature T4. This is only at temperature T2 prime. So there's enough scope for recovering the heat that's there. Now, this is on the TS diagram. On the VS plane, it will look like that. You got isentropic compression, isentropic, this isotropic, that's isotropic, this is isobaric. These two horizontal lines are isobaric because constant pressure lines. These two are isobaric in this particular case. Okay, this is completely subcritical operation. Now, what are the type of efficiency that we are looking at with a very, very, very ideal case and with air and minimum cycle operating pressure 193 bar? For a 30 plus efficient, now this is what exactly we want. At least I can get this kind of efficiency with the modern day steam plant. Why should I go and buy a Brayton cycle, say, operating with carbon dioxide, with I have got where steam is quite efficient. So in order to sell yourself, first and foremost thing you got to do is you got to match the efficiency of the steam cycle. So that's why I've drawn a purple line which shows what efficiency we are looking at. That is where actually I'm going to be happy with. So now you can see that quite a few options are not available at all. Only very few options are available. There is actually with the whole source temperatures and also what is the efficiency that you can get. Actually, you can see that these efficiencies are much, much smaller than but the Carnot efficiencies are. Even if you take, for example, if 1000, the ambient is at 300, 1000 minus 300 is 700 divided by 1000 will be almost 70%. We are nowhere near 70%. So the Carnot efficiency is something that is out of bounds for us. So for here is a comparison of air and CO2. Air as a working fluid and CO2 as another working fluid. Both compression 2-stage and 1 single stage. The merits of the carbon dioxide 2-stage, actually you can see that carbon dioxide 2-stage has got very high efficiency. So here again, you can see that if I need a minimum of 37% of efficiency, I can use this one, CO2 2-stage, 2-stage 3 bar. So you can see that I require still a source temperature of 1000, above 1000 Kelvin, which is a big ask nowadays. Okay. Okay, what are the gas exit temperatures like after regeneration? You can see that this is coil cell substrate. This is degrees Celsius, 100, 200, 300. Gas discharge temperature for source temperature of even if we take 1000 at the pressure that you are talking about, the gas discharge temperature is 350. That's quite substantial. 350 degrees is not a small amount. So, in fact, what is done in some cases is that heat also is recovered by operating an organic Rankine cycle, which is operated with like acetone or R12B1. Of course, R12B1 you can't use now, or even 134A or any other working fluid you can think of. So, if a 2-stage compression with intercooling is used, no bottoming of organic cycle is necessary. Bottoming organic cycle is necessary because the temperature will be quite low. Because even if you use it, the temperatures will be quite low. Now, if CO2 1 or 3 bar and in air 3 bar, further heat recovery is possible with polygeneration. Polygeneration means you produce heat and work at the same time, heat, cooling, and heating and cooling at the same time. With air at 2-stage compression and 1 bar, no further heat recovery oversee is feasible. That's actually one of air is also a working fluid used in Brayton cycle. So we are trying to compare air and carbon dioxide here. Okay, these are all the principal conclusions we get. So some performance indicators for subcritical carbon dioxide cycle. The first one shows the real efficiency, what you get. As you can see, the efficiency peaks at about little over 24, 25 degrees, 25% with various pressure ratios. You can see the pressure ratios you got are quite small, only somewhere between 2 and 2.5. Unlike in the case of steam, which I told you, the condensing cycle, you can go in for a large expansion ratio. Yeah, this is for and the efficiency. Once the pressure ratio is there, you can see that for various pressures, operating pressures at low operating pressure, there is not much of a difference here. Of course, there is a very little increase in the efficiency as you keep increasing the pressure. The triangle are the 1 bar, 5 bar, and 9 bar. As you can see that as you go to higher and higher pressures, it becomes the efficiency goes up, and also that is something. The pressure, the low pressure, this one goes up because of pressure ratio. The upper stage pressure also goes up. Okay, if it's 9 bar, optimum is coming at about 2.25 bar. You can find out 9 times 2.25, little over about 20 bar. That will be the upper stage pressure. But what are the efficiency we are talking about? Not more than about 25%. Now, if this is a comparison, that is for the real efficiency. If you look at, so for a pressure ratio of 2.3, which actually where the optimum occurs, the comparison of ideal and real cycle. So this is actually ideal cycle. This is the real cycle. So you can see that even for a source temperature of 900, we are nowhere near modern what you are looking for. What you are looking at is 35%, 37, one third of the, even if it's 33%, it never cuts it. So you need temperatures are much higher than that. That's one of the biggest problems with carbon dioxide or any gas-based subcritical generations. You remember, these are the performance characteristic for subcritical. Now let us look at this transcritical. What happens? Look at this curve and look at this, and see how they have transformed the efficiency and pressure ratio, efficiency and pressure ratio, efficiency and surface temperature. Again, you can see this for the real compressor, this for an ideal compressor. Or the actually ideal compressor will be the performance will be much better. Now, this is actually the real the compressor where actually you see the effect of pressure ratio on the efficiency. Here again, you can see that the efficiency just peaks not about no more than 3 in most of the cases. Possibly in this particular case, maybe slightly higher, 3.1 or 3.2. So this is these are the performance curves for the real efficiency versus pressure ratio at a fixed source temperature of 600 degrees Celsius. 600 is just about the temperature at which your steam power plant operates. So if I have the heat source available at 600, how does it compare with steam? Of course, the efficiencies are nowhere near what so the efficiency, how does it vary along with various temperatures? This graph actually shows. So this is the ideal situation. Dotted line is the ideal situation. This one is the real capacity. Here you can see that there is substantial amount of drop in the efficiency. That efficiency drop comes in because of several other reasons. That the assumptions we have performed, like there is no pressure drop and compression is isotropic and so on. So this is actually behavior of a transcritical non-condensing gas. So how does the supercritical one look like? You can see that now the pressure ratio versus efficiency. In fact, more or less, except at low pressure, 75 bar, you can see that the expansion ratio, we would say, this is actually the worst case scenario, which is actually 75 bar. The 75 bar, more or less, I can say it is peaking here, peaking there, and peaking more. And also we can find out where the what the pressure ratio is. We require pressure ratio roughly about 3.2 at a higher initial pressure. You don't see that one. There is nothing like an optimal. Of course, lower pressures you see, higher pressures you don't. For 75, 77, 79, 75, 77, 79, 81. At higher pressures, you don't. It doesn't go to the peak. So you are quite safe. Now, this is what the efficiency looks like. Now you can see this has gone well above 28%. What was it before? This is somewhere below 28%. Oh, sorry. Maybe the part I missed. So in the supercritical region, see this for you remember supercritical, the pressure has got to be more than the critical pressure, and the temperature of operation has got to be more than the critical temperature. So this is for various pressure. Actually, you can say there is not much of a difference. They actually bunch together. So efficiency versus pressure ratio. So the optimum comes only for 75 bar. As you keep increasing further, the optimum pressure ratio is because as the pressure ratio increases, your efficiency also keeps on increasing. Now here we compare the source temperature. How does it vary? This is for 600 degrees Celsius. How does it vary if you keep on varying in source temperature? Obviously, higher the source temperature, higher has got to be efficiency. So this is actually again ideal one. This is actually what will get real. What is the difference between ideal and real? In ideal case, we don't account for any losses because we assume that isotropic efficiency is 100%. In a real turbine, the efficiency is no isentropic efficiency is somewhere between 85 and 90%, and the compression efficiency will also be of that order. In addition, there will be losses in the heat exchangers and on the pipelines because of pressure drop. So comparison between ideal and real efficient for various pressure ratios 2, 2.5 and 3. 2, 2.5 and 3. This is the wide range that we are taking. How does it vary? Performance of it. So now you can see that for the various compression ratios 2, 2.5 and 3, obviously 3 should give a higher performance in all the cases, which is true, except at very low condition where actually there is a crossover of the plots as you can see in this part. Again, you see, if I have to get a minimum of 37% efficiency, I have to go to a heat source temperature which are in excess of 1000 degrees Kelvin. That's a big ask. Now, this is what is called a Brayton-Rankine cycle. What we mean here is there is a condenser also is present. That is the carbon dioxide that is emerging out of the turbine. After it has done exchange the heat within the regenerator, for the carbon dioxide that is going into the turbine, still there is such amount of heat. How do you recover that? So instead of recovering that, if you try to condense at a particular appropriate temperature, then is what you will get. Why is this efficiency? Because see, this 35% previous was again hovering about 32%. Here this one is pretty close, about hovering about 35%. What makes it possible? Here, what we are trying to do is a part previously, you remember, one of the biggest liabilities of the Brayton cycle is the compressor work. Usually, if the expander is, as the turbine is producing pretty close to about 100 kilowatts, the compressor will take away 50 to 60 kilowatts of that. So you are left with only 40. It's exactly like looking at income tax. Okay, so you always like to live in a place where the income taxation rate is quite low. Like for example, in India, we don't have much of very high income taxation rate. Whereas in this particular case, in the transcritical or rather Brayton-Rankine combination cycle, the part of the increase in pressure is done in the liquid state. So that much of power is actually saved. So because of the problem, the efficiency should actually go up. Now you can see that the actual efficiency itself reaches pretty close to about 35% in the case of course, at the high temperature of heat input, that's 1000 Kelvin. Now you can see when you try to operate at low temperatures at 5 degrees Celsius, what is the efficiency you're looking at? Hardly, not even 5%. So that's one of the reasons why you require very high temperatures for operation of carbon dioxide power generation cycle. Where such temperatures are available? One example is nuclear power reactors, where temperature you can get as much as you want. So carbon dioxide could be an ideal candidate for power generation in nuclear power plants. Now, the question is, what happened to the rest of it? I know that certain amount of work has been eaten away by the compressor. Is that all? Is the compressor is the only thing to blame? Is there some other losses are there? Look at the efficiencies we are looking at as no more than about 30, 35%. What happened to the rest of the 65%? So there is what in thermodynamic term, there is entropy generation or there is the exergy destruction. So what is happening? Let us look at what are the various sources of the sources of losses. This particular graph shows the real cycle real efficiencies. Sorry, efficiencies of various cycles here. This is actually a subcritical cycle. This is the transcritical non-condensing. This is supercritical. This is transcritical condensing. Among all of them, you can see the transcritical condensing gives the best performance. But when you go to higher and higher temperatures, very little to choose from them. But when you come to low source temperatures, this particular thing doesn't even work properly until the source temperature goes to about 600. Then it is zero. Then it starts gradually rising, no doubt about it. But at the same condition, you can see that the transcritic condensing cycle has got an efficiency of anywhere in excess of somewhere between 20 and 25%. So this is the worst. This is the best. This is transcritical. This is supercritical. So if you look at supercritical alone, so if you require again 35% efficiency, again we can say none of them will really satisfy that. So what is happening to now we sum up all the things. What is the optimal pressures for optimal expansion ratios for various low side pressure? Low side means, as you know, the Brayton cycle works between two pressure limits. One is what is called the low side pressure, and what is the high side pressure. High side pressure is what is the inlet condition to the turbine. Low side pressure is what is outlet condition to the turbine, which is also the inlet condition to the compressor. Now you can see that the thermal efficiency versus optimal pressure. This is the thermal efficiency. It keeps on, as you keep on increasing low side pressure, actually keeps on going up and up and up. Then the expansion ratio of 75, the expansion ratio will require about almost 3.5 to 0.4. If you want still higher efficiencies, actually this is the higher efficiency. The maximum efficiency you can get is somewhere about 77, pretty close about 80 bar. And what is the compression ratio you are looking at? Compression you are looking at 80, about 4.5. 80 times 4.5, that 320, 360 bar is the compressor inlet pressure that you require. You think you can manage that one? Possibly you can, but unfortunate thing is this also requires temperatures of the order of 600 degrees Celsius. There's got to be high pressure and high temperature. Both of them deadly. You got a carpenter I was mentioning to you earlier. He is only drunk. And in this particular case, he is not only he is drunk, he also smokes. So this is a big problem. So you don't want a smoking and drinking carpenter in your house to do the job. But still, he's a good worker. We can't really ask him to quit. So this is the high temperature at 600 degrees Celsius. Of course, if we go to higher temperatures, the efficiencies will be better, and also so also the compression ratios will also be. Compression ratios will essentially they remain the same. You can see that for low side pressure, the compression ratio, if you are the maximum, you will get expansion ratio is only about 4 at about 80. That means 320, 360 bar. That's what exactly I'm looking at. So this is for the subcritical. N stands for non-condensing, subcritical non-condensing. This is the zone of operation because this is the low side pressure. Expansion ratios are very small. You can two critical pressure is about 77. So I can maximum go up to roughly about here. You can see that the minimum the low side pressure I can go to is roughly about 30, 32 bar. Because by the time I go to multiply by 2 the expansion ratio, I have got I got nearly critical pressure. But I want to operate the entire thing below the critical pressure. This is the transcritical non-condensing. This is transcritical non-condensing in this particular rate. But once you go beyond about 77 bar, it becomes supercritical. Now, in supercritical, it doesn't monotonically increase, but after some time, the optimal, this one actually keeps coming down. Whereas efficiency in the supercritical nearly remains constant at about 32%, which is actually what we require. Now, let us look at the further comparison of all the 4 possible cycles. Here you can see this is the ideal efficiency, that is no losses in any way. These are the real efficiencies. See the huge drop in the efficiencies there. What happens as you go to higher and higher temperatures, they all bunch together, which has to be expected. So also is ideal, but there is such a huge drop in the efficiencies there. If I'm looking at minimum of 30% efficiency, And if I'm looking at the transcritical, this is actually say at 85 bar, I can get away with roughly about 830 degrees source in Kelvin, 830 degrees Celsius. But if I want 30% at other conditions, actually you have to go in for higher and higher temperatures. The biggest problem is, where am I going to get this kind of temperatures? Because one way of doing, that's why people are looking at the positive. One possibility is nuclear reactors. There's, you can go even to 2000 degrees if you want, but the problem is the materials and design become a bit of a problem. Here, if you are using solar and other geothermal, also 900 is a big ask. Geothermal, you are even much lower than this. So carbon dioxide cycles with geothermal may be a big question mark. Carbon dioxide cycle with the solar, yes, it is possible, but you need what they call as a power, concentrated solar power. It is power tower concept. There you can go up to 1000 degrees, 1000 Kelvin. Okay, now this is what is that. As you go to lower and lower pressures, you need higher temperature, which is obvious, because obviously the enthalpy is a function of pressure and temperature. If you go to is a stronger function of temperature than pressure. So as you keep increasing the temperature, the pressure requirement actually becomes much smaller. Now, at the same time, if you see the rate, now what you have to see, what I mentioned to you earlier, the compressor work is some kind of a parasitic work. The power generated, like I said, is like income tax. If you're earning something, and if you are going to, your taxman is going to take it over 60% of your earning, it's not it's not a very appropriate thing. You work hard, turbine works hard to produce about 100 megawatts, and the compressor fellow is going to take away 60, almost 60 watts. So you can see the turbine work to compression work ratio for various low side pressures. Obviously, this is the subcritical non-condensing region. Then you go to transcritical region. Then you go to supercritical region. This has been plotted for optimal pressure ratios, what we have decided earlier. So maximum is, you can go up to 30, about 35 bar. Pressure ratio about 2, you are pretty close to about, but the compression ratio was only about 2, very small in the case of subcritical region. So if you see in the subcritical region, these are for various temperatures, even at about 978 degrees Kelvin, you can see the compression ratio, turbine to work ratio is only 1.5. That is, the taxation ratio is in fact very high. But if you want to reduce you want to increase the ratio of turbine work compression work, you have to go in for higher and higher pressures. So if you go to supercritical region, this is the region. This is for 978 Kelvin. This is for 828 Kelvin. If you for 928 Kelvin, you can see that the expansion ratio is better than 3. That is, let's say if you are producing about 100 megawatts, only 33 megawatts is not bad. I think we also pay income tax around that range. It's not very bad about this. So it is the net ratio of net work output to heat recovery. Net work output is turbine work minus compressor work. That is divided by how much of heat is required. What is happening to turbine? Because in the trail race of turbine, there's enormous amount of heat available. So how much of heat you can recover in that one? If you look at that ratio, you can see that in the transcritical region, it is possible to recover quite a bit of heat. Whereas in the subcritical region, the amount of heat recovery you can incorporate, even that is small. So this region, by and large, you can say that, well, is not very good. It produces some power, but not very good. So this is actually one of the examples why we would like to have supercritical carbon dioxide power generation. Now, they confirm the efficiency is almost comparable to that of what you can get in the steam cycle. And the turbine work to compressor work ratio, much better, pretty close, almost it goes up to 5, it goes up to about 3. And then the heat recovery ratio is also quite large in this particular case. That's because this is obvious. Lesser the heat recovery ratio, more the heat recovery ratio, less will be the compressor work. So less will be this ratio also at the same time. That gels very well. Now let's see the next one. Reasons why Why? What is happening? Why these low efficiencies are coming? This also we do. We are earning some money, we are spending some money, somewhere something is not matching. What do? We do auditing. So let us do in thermodynamics, we do auditing. What do you mean by audit? What are the we want all the processes to be reversible. First and foremost thing, as a good thermodynamicist, you look at where are the irreversibilities coming in. Let us look at what are the irreversibilities there. These are various component irreversibilities there. One of them is the boiler. It's actually extremely small. So next you have this is the regenerator. Regenerator, other one is gas cooler. This is gas cooler. You can see that these two are really the ones which produce largest amount of irreversibility. That has got to be obvious. There's nothing surprising. Qualitatively also, we know any heat exchange is irreversible. So heat exchangers are biggest source of irreversibility. Then there is irreversibility in the turbine. This is irreversibility in the turbine. There is also irreversibility in the compressor. There is irreversibility in the compressor. So the two heat exchangers are the main sources of irreversibility. Regenerator and gas cooler, biggest source of irreversibility because both of them are heat exchangers. At low pressures and non-condensing subgrid, this one, condensing critical cycle, the compressor takes away substantially most of the compressor work that we have seen earlier. Even in supercritical operation, almost a third of the work is taken away by That's what we saw in the previous slide. Even here, you can see that the ratio is about 3.2, about 1/3. The ratio is 3.2, reverse is 1/30%. That is what is being taken away by the compressor. So that is the taxation rate. We got to live with it. So in spite of that one, is it good? Perhaps it is. Because I can tell you one thing, a 100 megawatt plant, rather, I would say, a 100 kilowatt carbon dioxide power generation plant, you can actually go on to a little bigger than one room, which is not possible with any other fluid because of the high densities at low specific volumes. That's one of the biggest. It becomes so compact. And the problem of compactness also brings in with the speed, which actually I will discuss about that one when we go to the expanders and the other limitations of carbon dioxide cycle. Okay, now you can see the biggest culprits are the heat exchangers. Why is that? You can, if you look at you look at the TS diagram. This is the compression, and you heat it up to very high temperature. This expands. See, very small ratio because of the small pressure ratio, it expands. Now, what is happening to all the heat that is here? So you are going to recover a part of it 4 to 6 to 2 to 5. Although you are adding only this much of heat from the heat transfer fluid, it's not good enough because quite a bit is actually you are using it for heating this one up. So that is why the any heat exchange between two streams is irreversible. That is the reason why you are losing so much of efficiency. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Okay, now let us look at what is performance. Okay, now we have decided. We know that a compressor takes away most of the heat. Heat exchangers are inevitable because the high temperature operation. I've got and turbine will use only a small portion of the enthalpy change of the gas, carbon dioxide. Quite a bit has got to be recovered from the rail, although we don't want it, but we want to recover as much as possible. So having said that, okay, now I have decided I'm going to live with it. Okay, now having appreciated that, now let us see what the performance of the carbon dioxide Brayton cycle is like. So cycle is. You remember in the morning I was mentioning to you regarding the refrigeration cycles. The COP and cooling capacity are not maximum at the same point. You have to, you normally in academic line, we always look at, I also gave an example, COP maximum, how much is COP? COP is not a criterion. So cooling capacity. Similarly, when it comes to question of power generation, the criterion is the amount of specific power, how much of work output I am going to get out of it. So if you plot the next worker, I plotted for a simple Brayton cycle which actually uses air, inlet pressure, atmospheric pressure, standard operating atmospheric temperature, but the source temperature of 1000 Kelvin, okay, ideal without regeneration and with regeneration. This is without regeneration and this is with regeneration there. So as you keep increasing the pressure, this is what you will get. When you get maximum, you can go to efficiency of 70%, no problem, but net output is 0. But I want to get some power output. So if you go to ideal cycle, if this is the point where I get the maximum power output, somewhere of the order of 220 kilojoules per kilogram. But my efficiency, I've taken a big hit on efficiency, is only about 45% compared to about 70% there. So do I want this or do I want this? If I want this, I have nothing to sell. If I sell more, but I don't have efficiency. So this is the, as you keep on increasing the pressure, 1 bar is inlet pressure. This is the operating pressure, that is high side pressure. If you keep on increasing the pressure, the efficiency comes down, but the power capacity goes up. Whereas if you have the without regeneration, this is what happen. This will happen without regeneration. This, of course, the efficiency goes up, work output also goes up, but it reaches a maximum at this particular point. Then again, it goes backwards there. This is for a typical air-based Brayton cycle. Again, as mentioned to you, the two parameters do not have an optimum at the same point. So like I said, you want maximum efficiency, I don't have any power. If I have maximum power, then efficiency is not equal to 0, but still I take a big hit on the efficiency. So in academia, we emphasize on efficiency, but industry never worries about efficiency. They want to maximize this power generation. Okay. Now, this is what it looks like. Nature of efficiency specific formulation. This you got to look at. Like in the case of refrigeration, we plotted what is called efficiency is something analogous to COP, and net work output is analogous to cooling capacity. So there we plotted 1 over COP versus 1 over cooling capacity. So that means the entire thing gets reversed. Here, that's actually quite difficult to conceptualize. Is it better if I plot it specific work method? So what happens now? So this is the line for transcritical non-condensing cycle. This is the behavior of supercritical. S stands for supercritical, Tn stands for transcritical non-condensing. Tn stands for non-condensing. Let us look at the basically shape of the curve. They may not be identical, but they are analogous to each other. What do we have? Efficiency. Efficiency, transcritical, non-condensing, maximum here. Efficiency of supercritical is somewhere Bs. Bs are the 2 points of maximum thermal efficiency. So this is the one. So this is the direction of increasing pressure. I am plotting this one for a transcritical. The starting pressure is 50 bar, low side pressure. For the supercritical, the low side pressure has got to be 75 bar, which is actually pretty close to the critical pressure. It has got to be above the critical limit. So this is actually in direction of increasing pressure. As you keep on increasing, beyond this particular point, you don't get anything. So A to B, what happens when you are going from, you don't want to operate anywhere less than A because the net specific power is quite low and also efficiency is quite low. But then you start increasing the pressure ratio. This keeps on going up, and up. It comes back here. That's where it reaches the maximum efficiency. But your power generation is only about less than maybe about 55 kilojoules per kilogram. But if you keep on increasing pressure, if you become greedy, I want to have more efficiency. No, it doesn't work. The efficiency actually comes down. But what becomes better is your power generation. So the power generation has a maximum somewhere here. So you can see, if I want maximum efficiency, I could have sold only about 55 kilojoules per kilogram. If I maximize my power generation capacity, I am going up almost 85. So almost pretty close to about 70 to 80% increase in I'm getting there. And what is the hit I have got on the efficiency? From about 33, 34% to about 28%, about 6% loss in efficiency. That's what I have. That is in the case of transcritical non-condensing. In the case of supercritical cycle, this is what I have. Efficiency here is not too big compared to this, but you see the power generation capability, specific power generation is quite large for supercritical carbon dioxide cycle. This is of course for with the regeneration. This is for without regeneration. So let's not even worry about without regeneration, because it's only of theoretical interest. No one operates without regeneration. A to B, efficiency increases, specific power increases. B, point of maximum efficiency. B to C, the efficiency decreases, but power generation increases. So C and beyond is not of interest. I don't want to operate in this region at all. Why should I keep on increasing the pressure when I'm neither getting the power or I'm getting the higher efficiency? So this is not of it. So this is what is there. So usually what happens is, although you maximize Wilson, usually any thermal power plant doesn't work under constant load. The load actually keeps on changing. So where do you want to be when the load is changing? So what is the maximum load change that I can permit? I can permit load change from roughly about 85 kilojoules per kilogram equivalent down to, but if I want to maintain within the dome, I can have power generation up to about 20. So if the load becomes even smaller than that one, I'll be better off turning off the turbine rather than operating at even a lower pressure. This way, neither the efficiency is good nor the power generation is good. So I should be operating in this dome region always. And similarly, if it is a supercritical operation, I should be operating in this particular zone. Okay, that is the nature of the curve, nature of the efficiency specific in population. Now let us see exactly what it looks like for transcritical, non-condensing and supercritical cycle for various heat source temperature. If you have got a heat source only about 600, now you can see this loop is extremely small. 700 becomes larger, 800 becomes larger. Remember, always this is the direction of increasing pressure. So when I go to about 1000 Kelvin, I can see that I can almost, this curve is similar to what we had said before, almost about 33%, which is like, this is actually point of maximum efficiency, point of efficiency. So these are the ISO for each, and these are the isotherms on the loop, specific work efficiency loop. This is for the supercritical cycle. You can see that here, this is somewhat narrower from this one. So you can see that, of course, the scale is not on the same scale. You can see there's a specific power is actually much, much larger for the same 1000 Kelvin supercritical carbon dioxide cycle, use almost about 115, whereas for the same 1000 Kelvin transcritical non-condensing use no more than about 90. Again, it makes sense for me to go for supercritical carbon dioxide. But having said that one, let us look at the various pressures. Now, we have seen that earlier, the pressures we can go to about 80 or 85 bar. When you take into account the compression ratios, you are looking at somewhere about 400, 450 bar. Whether that is economical, whether it is sustainable, whether it is safe to operate, that's a big question mark that we have. So this efficiency specific calculation is quite important in determining the plant operation. In fact, this kind of a behavior is important in any power generation, not necessarily steam. Even if you can plot the same thing for even a normal Rankine cycle, you will see that the same behavior you will get, the same loop you will get. Even if you, for example, you can, when you go back to your colleges, or of course, you can ask your students to calculate the power generation and efficiency for a Rankine cycle for various heat source temperatures. You will get exactly the same behavior, slightly with a different shape. But the qualitatively it will be the same, quantitatively it may be different. Okay. Now let's see this. What are the other issues? So we have seen what are the compressor issues. Then we have the heat exchangers, which are the biggest culprits in our whole drama. So here so what we have to do, we have to tame the heat exchangers. Heat exchangers, basically they involve heat transfer and pressure drop. These are the two issues that we got. Not only that we want heat transfer to be large, and we want to also pressure drop to be large. Friends, let me tell you one thing. We never win fighting against nature. The heat transfer coefficient will be better in the turbulent region than the laminar region. The reason for that one is that in the turbulent region, the heat transfer coefficient is proportional to in the velocity or mass flow rate to the power 0.8, because that is RE power 0.8 and Prandtl number roughly about 1/3 you will get. Prandtl number in this case it is same, whether it is carbon dioxide cool, it doesn't change much, it changes a little bit. Prandtl number is locked in because of the properties of fluid. It's about is 1/3 here. Now, if you heat transfer coefficient, by and large, if you take Nusselt number and other correlations into account, it is the proportional diameter power 0.8 and Prandtl number, heat transfer coefficient will be proportional to this number. That's after taking into account the mass flow rate. So heat in a turbulent region, we would like to be always in turbulent region, is proportional to velocity power 0.8. In the laminar region, it is velocity power 0.5. So that's why we want to be the turbulent region, number one. Number two, when it comes to question of pressure drop, whether it's laminar or turbulent, it's immaterial. The pressure drop is proportional to velocity power 2. Where when you increase the velocity, your heat transfer coefficient goes by, it doesn't rise proportionately, it only raises by power of 0.8. But you increase the velocity, the pressure drop goes squares, doubles actually. So this is something you got to be aware of. Always increasing the velocity just as well, because you are going to increase the pressure drop too. So virtually no difference between the two streams for 75 and 80. This is the warm stream. These are the 300 stream. This is the stream that is coming from the compressor. 300 bar, 200 bar, 250. So you can see that depending upon this one, the heat transfer coefficient factor. This is here. This factor is quite large for cold stream. For the warm stream, both of them, they increase with surface the temperature, but this is not large because I've plotted only up to 600 because this is where the heat recovery is occurring. So this is for the warm stream, how it changes. I think it is coming down from here to here, but the cold stream is going up from here as it heats up. You can see that this heat transfer coefficient, this parameter for carbon dioxide. So highest is for more pressure, 300 bar. But with the question of pressure drop, you can see that the pressure drop is quite large, 75 bar and 80 bar. Pressure drop is quite large. So why is the pressure drop large? At higher temperatures, the viscosity is higher for gases. So this is what is the what is the, of course the pressure drop is the not only viscosity, the density also is factored there. So it's a mu rho. This is actually what we call what I call the pressure drop factor. This is what I call as the heat transfer factor. This quantity, because rest of them are all constant, so we don't have to worry about it. In the pressure drop, obviously Prandtl number is not there. So whereas Prandtl number will appear, Prandtl number is different for these two states. That way I got to take that one into account. Okay, now this is the pressure drop factor. You can see the cold side pressure drop is substantially smaller than the warm side pressure drop. Here, cold side heat transfer coefficient factor is much better than the warm side heat transfer factor. So the cold side is better for heat transfer and pressure point of view compared to the warm stream. So we got to keep in mind how you design the channel dimension. Here you can see it's inversely proportional to diameter power negative 1.8. There is inversely proportional diameter power negative 4.75. So these diameters, the powers are not the same. Okay, here viscosity power 0.25, viscosity power 0.8. So pressure drop and heat transfer, they're again correlated. So this we have got to keep in mind in designing of the heat exchangers. Okay, now let's go to what are the critical science and engineering challenges that we have. One, development of high temperature receivers for Brayton cycle, because you have to operate at about 800 to 1000 Kelvin. The 870 is a minimum Kelvin, minimum 1000 Kelvin is more like it. CO2 as a working fluid. So you then high temperature and thermal energy storage system, because solar energy is the concentrated solar power. You can't concentrate till about, if you take sunrise at 6 and sunset at 6, you can't really concentrate till about 8 o'clock in the morning or till and you can stop concentrating. It will stop concentrating by about 4 in the evening. So what do you do after that? Is it got available only for 8 hours? So for the rest of the 16 hours, because the power plant has to operate all the time. So you need a thermal energy storage system. So development of high efficiency, low cost reflectors for power tower system, because power towers are required to concentrate using various reflectors around the tower. Development of, so you have to go in for power tower. Normal concentrated collectors will not be sufficient. Development of high efficiency compressors and turbine expanders, because currently turbine efficiencies are roughly of the order of 85 to 90%, both turbines and expanders. Expanders are a little bit more efficient than the compressors. So you've got to do a lot of research in improving the efficiencies of these two systems if you want to go in for that high level, because you want to reduce all the inefficiencies or irreversibilities there. And then research on, because anyway certain amount of heat has got to be rejected, because you can't recover any heat below the compressor discharge temperature. So still there is quite a bit of heat available there. So you have to think of other ways of recovering that, either by making a poly generation unit which have either operating a ORC or an adsorption refrigeration system. The biggest liability is the compressor power. If this can be taken out, there will be no limitation of power ratios nor any other limitations imposed by it. So suppose you want to be in a place where there is no income tax, how do you love it? All the income is winner take all. So let us see if there is a possibility of replacing the compressor. That is, at least I don't take out the compressor power, because compressor power is a high grade power, like rotational energy, electrical energy, potential energy. These are the three high grade powers in engineering. All the other things like heat, sound, and other things, they are all weaker forms of energy. So if I can somehow take out the compression part out of the mechanical power, I'll be doing exceedingly well. So what should I do? Can I use any other form of energy? As you know, for compression, I require energy. Is there any way of compressing a gas other than mechanical power? That's a big question now. Now let us address that one now. Now we go for thermal Brayton cycles with thermal compression. What is a thermal compression? We use the heat for compressing the fluid. What exactly do we do? The compression process is achieved using the heat energy instead of shaft energy. Number one. I haven't told you how I'm going to do it. Two possible methods are, one is called absorption route and adsorption. You remember a vapor absorption refrigeration system which operates between two pressure limits of water. Then you have a pump which actually just takes it from low pressure to high pressure, and there is a generator where actually generated. So carbon dioxide, if you have an absorber, there are some fluids which actually absorb carbon dioxide, but better than that's a possibility, but I don't know much about absorption of carbon dioxide at high pressures, whereas adsorption, that's something on which I have worked on and our team has worked on, so I can throw some light on that. How to adsorption is we require a solid. Actually, activated carbons are excellent adsorbents for carbon dioxide, and also we require adsorption isotherms for them. It uses all the adsorption compression uses low grade thermal energy. Well, I'm not going to use 1,000 kilo. If I have 1,000 kilograms heat source, I'm not going to use that one for my compression. Many times there's a lot of waste heat is available. Somewhere between, I don't need at very high temperatures. 100 to 150 degrees is more than sufficient. I will use 1,000 Kelvin for power generation. I can use a low grade thermal energy if I have two heat sources for achieving the thermal compression. And how do I achieve the thermal compression? The compression is achieved through a manipulation of pressure, uptake, and temperature of working fluid, and its adsorbent instead of pressure, volume, temperature plane in the convection. In the conventional compression, we do the work on PVT plane. In the adsorption compression, we do work on PCT plane, where C is a concentration uptake, what you can call it. So if you see the TS diagram for this one, so this is the low pressure, this is high pressure I require. The normal isentropic compression, I would have gone from I would have gone from P1 to P2. I would have gone in compression. So where in turbine, I would have P1 to P2. So what I am going to do now is that I'm going to go from P1 to P2. May not be exactly there, somewhere along this pressure. I'm not going to go in the isentropic way. I will go in a different way. Let us see how I'm going to do it. PL, P2 or P. Now, invariably, the low pressure is fixed because the turbine discharge pressure. High pressure is also we got to choose, and we know the heat source temperature, and the TL happens to be invariably the ambient. TL happens to be the ambient. So how do I do that one? So this is similar to your pressure volume temperature diagram. Of course, unlike there, here I got the pressure on the x-axis, this is y-axis. Concentration is something analogous to volume, not exactly, is on the y-axis. These are various temperatures. These are what are called isotherms. These are the isotherm. These are this is the low pressure, low temperature isotherm. This is the high temperature, because as the temperature is higher, gas can only absorb lower amount of water. So the cycle, the compression cycle we have is the A, B, C, D. We can take this A, B as the equivalent to a suction in the conventional compressor. PC is actually the compression. CD is actually the discharge from the compressor. And DA, you can take it as a re-expansion. In a compressor, there are 4 processes: suction, compression, discharge, and re-expansion. So this ABCD will represent or analogous to that. So this is how the work is done. So when it takes in at a low pressure and low temperature, because when it cools down, this is where actually it takes in. Once the compressor is isolated, then actually you supply the heat. When the suction occurs, that means the concentration actually goes up. The adsorbent is able to take more and more. This is the maximum I can take, because that is the saturation limit. How much, like exactly, you have got a blotting paper or your towel, how much of moisture it can take. There's a limit to it. So similarly, even an adsorbent has got a limit on how much of carbon dioxide it can absorb. So once I have that one isolated, the adsorbent and absorb or the carbon dioxide are heated up. When you heat up, what happens? The concentration doesn't change. So at constant concentration, you heat it up. The pressure keeps on building up. When you have the required pressure or the discharge pressure or the turbine inlet pressure you have reached, you open the valve, then the gas starts going out. So obviously the concentration comes down. When it comes down to about after the discharge, once it has come here, the concentration come down here. What you do is you cool from this temperature. This is at a high temperature, and this is actually usually this will be temperature will be low temperature heat source which you use for heating. So then actually you cool it down to this temperature where it is able to take up the refrigerant once again. So this is actually the cycle. This is ideal cycle. But in actual reality, what happens is this point A shifts to A prime and C shifts to C prime. That is, instead of having that A to B amount of concentration change, I have only A prime to B. This is equivalent to saying you got a the positive displacement compressor where you got what is called a clearance volume. The effect of clearance volume is to reduce the volumetric efficiency. The volumetric efficiency, this is what is called uptake efficiency. Volumetric efficiency is defined as what the actually volume that you have got divided by from the geometrical stroke length and bore, what is the volume you should have got. So similarly, what is the uptake I should have taken divided by what actually I have taken divided by what is uptake I should have ideally have taken. This is what is called uptake efficiency. Unlike in the regular compressors, uptake efficiency, volumetric efficiency of the order of 80-85%. Here, the uptake efficiencies are quite low in adsorption compressors, which will be no more than 50 to 60%. So, what are the other parasitic heating compressors? Like there we had by and large, the compressors are the one which eat away everything. But here is actually it is eating away heat energy instead of high grade electrical energy. So when you the void volume effect actually reduces the actual uptakes. That means you need more adsorbent for absorbing certain amount of flow. It's a flow rate of carbon dioxide. So the thermal inventories are first and foremost thing. You got to change the enthalpy of adsorbent from low pressure, low temperature to high pressure, high temperature. This is exactly same as what happens in a conventional compressor. This is that enthalpy change. There you brought it because of high grade work. Here we are bringing it to low grade work. What is parasitic heating here? Here the heating and the heat. Then you got to heat not only the carbon dioxide you are heating. The carbon dioxide is absorbed, so activated carbon you got to heat, and the activated carbon and carbon dioxide contain a container. Your container also you got to heat, and there is a lot of thermal energy storage in the container, so you got to take everything apart. Then, because all the adsorption and desorption process, the adsorption is exothermic process. So for desorption, you have to supply what is called a heat of desorption. This occurs something which doesn't occur in the case of regular reciprocating compressor, because there is only one component there. So we have to supply heat of desorption then the heating, the conglomerate of adsorbed activated carbon and, of course, and the body, and the enthalpy change. This is exactly same as what you have conventional compressor. Activated carbon has an excellent is an excellent adsorbent for the carbon dioxide. Okay, now this is what we call as a single stage thermal compression system. Single stage thermal compression. Unlike in a regular compressor, you just got away with one compressor. Whereas adsorption system, with your compressors usually operate somewhere around about 1500 RPM. That is, by the time you blink, it has discharged about 25 times nearly. This guy discharged about 25 times. Whereas these thermal compressors have got a very large time constant. So they take few hundreds of seconds in order to complete one cycle. So if you want continuous flow, only once in 100 seconds is so you need 4 compressors put in tandem. So one of them is adsorbing, one of them is heating, one of them is discharging, desorbing and discharging, one of them is cooling. So this whole cycle takes few hundreds of seconds. So you can't have just one, you have to have 4. That's actually one of the liabilities. That is, each of them has to have again the activated carbon in them. Each of them needs again a heating system. Each of them needs a cooling system. So you said this is the desorption manifold. From desorption manifold, you can take it into the turbine. Of course, here you can use the heater in order to supply extra heat and expand it to turbine. After coming to the turbine, there instead of rigid, you can actually take it into adsorption manifold and take it to this adsorption manifold. Acts like a queuing system. Once it supplies to this, second time it supplies to this absorber, and so on. So this is actually a single stage unit. But single stage adsorption compression is very, very inefficient. The efficiencies are not even about 2 to 3%, just not worth it. So what we can do the compression in 2 stages. Remember, earlier we mentioned the compression also in the morning, but the refrigeration we did it in 2 stages. Similarly, here also we do the thermal compression in 2 stages. 2-stage thermal compression adsorption-based thermal compression Brayton cycle. How do you like it? Here, what happens is, as usual, even in reciprocating compressors, the low stage will be larger in size than the upper stage. Same thing happens in adsorption compressors because the uptake capabilities are much better at higher pressure than at lower pressure. This is the low stage adsorption compression, high stage. In between, you have got intercooler, like you have like you have 2-stage mechanical compression. So here, what is happening is for carbon dioxide, if I take this one as the saturation line, so I got the low pressure here. So I compress from 1 to 2. I can't show a line here because adsorption compression, I can't show you a line because there is also adsorbent present, activated carbon present. I know only the end states 1 and 2. Then what I do, I cool it back to the same temperature at intermediate pressure. Then I do the another compression 3 to 4. So then I do the heat addition, then expansion in the turbine, and then heat rejection. Of course, you can have now here there is no regenerator here, you have to say, because you can do regeneration here, but that you have got to do from. I have not shown the regeneration here. Some part of regeneration will be possible between this and this. I have not shown that. So this is a 2-stage thermal compression system, adsorption based thermal. So what is the performance? What does it look like? Now you take winner take all. Earlier, we had expansion ratios of no more than about 2, 3, or 4. Now you can see there is no limit. If I keep on increasing the expansion ratio, I keep on getting, and the source temperature, I can specific work I can keep on getting increasing the specific work also at the same time. So this is one of the main advantages. I'm not limited by the expansion ratio because there you had more expansion ratio. You have to compress that one in a compressor in a normal Brayton cycle. Here, I don't have to do that. So this is what exactly I have. I have got continuously increasing, monotonically increasing specific work output for VSD. And also the for various source temperatures, if I keep on increasing the source temperature, like I can operate. I don't need about 800,000 Kelvin to get this kind of power. I can get even you can see that the specific work output in this particular plot, specific work per kilojoules per kilogram of carbon dioxide, I can get almost about if you take this particular thing, I can almost I can get 90 kilojoules per kg. You can see here. I can with an efficiency of about 22%. Here, what I mean by efficiency is you have to be very careful in defining what is efficiency. You cannot take the entire thermal energy into consideration. Then actually efficiency will be drastically smaller. You have to convert into exergy equivalent. So if I had the same temperature, how much of work it would have produced, that is the work which is going into it. So if you take that one into account, that is efficiency, that is exergy component of thermal energy I got to take into account, then define the efficiency, I'm getting almost 20 to 23% here. Okay. Now see what is the power I will get? Almost 80 to 90. That's what exactly I was getting. And now you see the heat source temperature is only 300 degrees. I didn't have to go for 800 degrees. I can go to lower temperatures, higher expansion ratios, higher specific power, everything I'm benefiting. But what is the flip side of it? If I have to produce in megawatt level of electricity, these compressors will become huge. You will need tons and tons of carbon, activated carbon. So you need a source for producing that kind of a carbon, that kind of activated carbon, and then fill them up, and all the associated engineering systems you got to overcome. And entire thing is actually going to operate at much lower pressures too, lower pressures and the lower temperatures. So it's actually it's actually win-win situation that we have here. So thermal compression, but friends, it doesn't exist yet. But if you and your students put your mind to it, possibly in about 10 years' time, we'll have something like this working. Okay, I think that should be my last slide for the time being. Yeah, that's it. That's my last slide. So, by and large, what is it that we are taking away from here? Carbon dioxide, good working fluid even for power generation. Unlike carbon dioxide refrigeration cycle, there are thousands of them coming in the picture. We don't have anything coming in the near future in carbon dioxide-based power generation cycle. Still, it is an enormous amount of research and development stage. A lot of components have got to be developed. Enormous amount of research and development has to take place. Mainly the materials and also the heat transfer correlations and other things. And also that is in spite of all that one. So we only have only small fraction of power generated in the turbine coming as useful power for us. So in order to avoid the compressor work, we can go in for thermal compression. That is still at this stage hypothetical. But for refrigeration, thermal compression has been tried out and they have built the systems already. For organic Rankine cycle, for the Brighton thermal compression based Brayton cycle, we haven't done anything yet. So possibly we can do it at some point, or maybe you people can do it at some point. Can do it. Activated carbon is available at plenty in India. Carbon dioxide available free. You can build the absorbers and see what kind of performance you get and see where we can go further from there. Thank you very much for your attention. Now I invite your questions if you have any. Yeah. Just raised a hand.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your nice presentation. Sir, my question is, you said we need a very high temperature, about 1000 Kelvin, to use this CO2 as a working fluid in this power cycle. And in nuclear power plants, we generally have that much high heat or thermal energy available. So, sir, are we using, and I know in some AGR advanced gas power plants, we use CO2 as a coolant. So can we use the same CO2 for as a refrigerant in our power cycle, or there are two separate circuits?
No, you can have a separate circuit because CO2. See, instead of even nuclear power plants use essentially they produce steam. The heat is coming from nuclear reaction instead of just burning of coal. So you can have a separate CO2 cooling. I know that it's already used in nuclear power plant. So you can have one loop for cooling. There you don't require such high pressures. So on the other hand, you can use CO2 as the working fluid for the power plant. Just replace steam with the CO2. You let CO2 exchange heat with the nuclear source, and then you can expand it to the turbine and generate power.
Okay, so sir, it is still in research phase or anywhere it's
There's
actually being
some,
used?
I don't think it has been done yet. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure. I don't think carbon dioxide based power generation is not really still experimental. I don't think anyone is producing power using carbon dioxide as working fluid. That's what we are trying to do, because in our center, one of the main objectives of the Indo-US project was to build a power plant with carbon dioxide, concentrated solar power and carbon dioxide. Because one of the biggest problems today is water has become a very, very precious commodity. And pure water is even a more precious commodity. So the world is reeling under water shortages now. So some of we got to move away from water also and use some other working fluid. Whereas carbon dioxide is again available in plenty in the atmosphere itself. Also, we got to take it out from the atmosphere. And of course, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, there's a lot of carbon dioxide, we can take it back. But again, in a thermal power plant, if you're using CO2, CO2 is in closed cycle. A very small amount of can leak out. So that you can always replace without any problem. At this stage, is to answer your question, yeah, it is still hypothetical. It can be done. Most probably in about 10 years' time, it will become a reality.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, any question from audience?
Yeah.
Participants.
Yes, sir. Shoot.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. So your voice is not very audible. No, there's a lot of echo is coming from your voice. Something else is on. If you can turn it off. Can you put it in a chat? If you got any question, I can answer that one. Oh,
Yeah, Karthikeyan, sir.
yeah,
Karthikeyan,
I
sir.
can.
Yeah, yes,
No,
sir. Good evening,
Yes,
sir.
no,
yes.
but someone said he can see only the first slide. Could you see any of the other slides or not? You can see all slides.
Yes,
Yes, sir. We
yes.
were able to see. We were able to
Very
see.
good. Okay, that's what I, because otherwise the whole my presentation will be a waste if you can't see my slides.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's regarding about refrigeration.
Yeah.
Ethane also the same kind of property like to the CO2. So why we have to omit that ethane, sir?
Ethane has got a boiling point. Actually, the pH curve is pretty low. The critical point is very, very low.
Okay, sir.
Is well below the carbon dioxide one. So it will be quite difficult to operate in a vapor compression cycle. You can go use for extremely low temperature. For example, in LNG and all that they use it, but not in this one. The commercial refrigeration ethane is a bit difficult because its critical point is quite low. So you have to condense and evaporate, right? If you can't do that one, you can't produce a refrigeration. Whereas carbon dioxide, even at -20, I can do it. Whereas ethane, it will be difficult for me to do that.
Yeah, yes, sir. But regarding the cascade refrigeration, the people only focus on that R744 and R717 only.
Yeah.
But instead of that, we can use for ethane and propylene.
Propellant can be used, but they are actually used in the LNG industry. But there you require extremely low temperature. LNG, you got to be liquefied pretty close to about 100 and minus 150 degrees or something like that. So there actually propellant is used. Because there is a cascade system here. Ethane and propellant are used in cascaded system. First, actually, one stage takes propellant, then actually next stage takes over to they are taken over by ethane. That's what happens. Not at commercial refrigeration is it won't be viable. Propellant.
Yeah, thank you.
On the other hand, instead of propylene, you can use propane itself. Propane is a very good refrigerant, and already systems exist with propane.
I think, is it clear, Karthikeyan, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else from the participants? Please interact with sir if you have any doubts or anything. So, sir, Srinivasan sir, we are going to conduct an exam at 4:30.
Hmm?
So we are going to conduct exam at 4:30, sir, regarding till last 5 days workshop, what we
Oh, I
discussed.
see. I see. Oh, it's a course, it's not a seminar.
Yes, both. Like in a way, like as per government norms, we need to conduct exams.
Okay.
I think most of them they're preparing or right. I don't know.
No, there's nothing to freak out. It's going to be open slide exam, not open book, open slide exam, right?
Yeah, open slide exam, sir. They can see from
they
there.
can- yeah. Yeah.
From participant, please respond if anyone want to talk to sir.
Yes, sir, I have one more question. You said it is a closed loop cycle, and so how its condenser heat rejection thing is designed? It is normally a cooling tower with water, or it is some different design is there?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned to you earlier, they have been final cooling. After regeneration, still the gas is quite warm. That has got to be cooled.
Yes.
So that cooling is again, like I told you, can use water cooling, but the biggest problem is now that water has got to be recycled. So that means that water has to reject the heat somewhere to the ambient. So that's a big, like I told you in the morning, what holds good for a cooling tower there in a refrigeration plant also holds good for as a cooling tower in there is a cooling tower in the heat rejection system in the carbon dioxide power generation also. So by and large, what they do is you go in for air cooled one. So you take out after regeneration, the gas is taken out and then it is rejected using the fans, rejected to the ambient. That's what all we can do.
Okay.
In some cases, they do recover that heat because that exhaust is still at about 180 to 200 degrees. It's quite warm. So what you can do is that they apply what is called a bottoming cycle. So you apply organic Rankine cycle, whereas organic fluid like acetone or 134A, any of these fluids are used. And that heat is used in the boiler of those organic Rankine cycles. So still you produce some power. Whatever you produce, you just use it. It may be very small. Maybe in a 100 megawatt plant that may produce only about 1 megawatt. Still, 1 megawatt is not bad. You just use that one.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask one question to participants. Answer the question, please. One of your students says, I have 1,000 megawatt power plant, like Raichur or Ramaguttam or Vijayawada area thermal power plant, 1,000 megawatt power plant. Your student comes and says, sir, I got a technology with which I will produce 1 megawatt extra. Okay? He convinces you that how he is going to do that 1 megawatt. But obviously, nothing is free in this world. What will you do? Will you accept that proposal? You won't accept the proposal. 1,000 megawatts is what you're producing. He says, instead of 1,000, I will produce 1,001 megawatts. What will be your answer to it? Maybe it can be part of your examination system, Dr. Dinesh.
First, we need to see how much cost it will take to produce extra, because installing power plant is a capex. It's a lot of initial capital
Correct.
is required. So we
Correct.
need to look at that. What is
Correct.
the payback, or
Okay.
what is the internal rate of return for the technology that we are going to use?
Okay, I will tell you. I want 2 crores for that, for installing that. 1 megawatt. Will you give me the 2 crores to install, or say you forget about it?
Still, how much space required? Because in power plants we also have the problem of space.
I don't need, for doing the traditional thing, I don't need much of space. It's existing space itself. I'm going to make things a little bit more efficient to produce that. I don't need extra space. I don't need extra manpower. I don't need extra space, but I have to get some equipment. Naturally, nothing is free. So I need some extra equipment and gadgets and controls and things like that. For that, I need about 2 crores. See, you're talking about the power plant, which is about thousands of crores. I just want to give you 2 crores. I will produce that one.
Yeah, so sir, my thing is that if I will calculate the internal rate of return and the payback, and if somebody is funding,
That's what you tell me. You tell me. You've got all the data now. I told you about 2 crores,
but
1 megawatt.
I don't have that number. Actually, what is the if 2 crores 1 megawatt? So in if we say 1 year, 8,760 hours. So we are having 8,760 hours megawatt hour electricity we can generate. So it is about, if I take 10 rupees, so 8,700 600, it is about 90,000 megawatt hours I can generate, 8 rupees. So I can generate 90,000, only 1 lakh rupee I can generate in a year.
Sorry, your
That's the
calculation is something wrong. In a year, how many hours was it? 375 times 24?
Yeah.
You say some 8,000 hours, 8,700 hours?
8,760 hours. So
Yeah,
I can take,
1,000 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt, 1 megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts.
yeah,
1,000
so,
times 8,760.
1 megawatt, 10.
But megawatts, 1,000 kilowatts.
Okay, 1,000 kilowatts.
1,000 times 8,760.
Yeah, 1,000 kilowatts multiplied by, if I take 9,000.
8,760.
Yeah, so it is.
Then multiplied by, I am selling, of course, you pay maybe about 10 rupees. The power plant, produce, sell it about 5 rupees per kilowatt hour. How many rupees it is?
Just like 9 crore rupees.
Then I want to really 2
Yeah.
crores.
Then I'm sure. I can sure invest.
I'm going to give it back to you in about 2 months.
Yeah,
Why
sure.
didn't you say yes? Why didn't you say yes in the beginning?
Yeah, yes.
That's
I didn't have that much at that time. I didn't have that.
No, now you have it. Now you have it. You took only a few minutes to do that calculation, doctor.
Yeah, it is beneficial.
That's what we are looking at. So what matters is, people always look at 1,000, only 1 meg. It doesn't matter. That's why they say 1 watt saved is 1 watt generated. You try to save every watt and every. Say if some student comes and says 1 mega, even if he says half a megawatt, still you are paying back within less than 1 year.
Yes,
So
yes.
you must always look at it that way. Yeah, half a megawatt. Even if it is half a megawatt, 1,000 times 1,000 times 8,760. Okay, times 5. Even if you take 5 rupees, at which, I mean, you buy the power at 10 rupees, but the power plants they sell at about 5 rupees, half the cost.
Yes.
Because all there will be T&D losses and everything will be there. So this 5 rupees. So you can see that what is the type of money you are looking at.
Yeah, it's less than 6 months. If we are getting payback, then we should obviously go for the technology. If somebody is ready to investment, bank is giving loan.
Why should bank give a loan? You are actually made so much of money in the selling power in the previous years. So you use that money, say a small portion of, if you go to Ambani, he will just put it to you on the across the table, he will give you that kind of money. Because they are the people who see this kind of a benefit in that one.
Yeah.
So he won't take this much of time to see what is the benefit. If you say 1 megawatt, de do mujhe, pehle de do. Even half a megawatt de do, main le leta hun. That's what he's going to say.
Yes, yes.
That's why he is Ambani. That's why where I am.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Everywhere, the power generation, that is very important. You look at the absolute terms of every watt.
Yes.
Okay, that's why we are looking at all my mornings and afternoon talk, essentially to impress upon you people how important both refrigeration and power generation are. And both of them are highly
Yes, sir. Now present India facing that problem. Now India facing that problem. Now India is facing that problem, sir, the power problem.
There is a power problem. No, now there is a power problem because there is no coal. If you look at 1 year back,
Yes.
1 year back, there is no power problem. In fact, India has produced the excess power. We got too much of power. You go into national grid, this one, you just see the total power generation consumption. Power generation is more than power consumption. Actually, India is one of the very good countries where the installed capacity to generation capacity pretty close to about 90 to 95%. Actually, our power plants are much more as efficient as anywhere in the world. They are producing much more power than what we can consume. In fact, most of the power plants, they are toning down the power because there is no demand.
Okay.
So there is no shortage. No, you just look at the national grid, this one, every hour they put the data there. How much power is generated right from Nagaland down to Kerala. or Tamil Nadu to Kashmir, Ahmedabad to Kolkata, everywhere, every state, every hour, the data is available. You just have a look at it. Except in very few states, the majority of the state, there is the power generation is excess than the power consumption. Except in Delhi, and in the evenings, yes, when everyone in summer, when everyone turns on their air conditioning, the power demand goes up and the power generation is not able to meet. The rest of the country is always the other way around. That's why the government is asking. So you start more industries. Why did you go in for railway electrification all over the country? Because you want to consume the power.
Yes,
The power plant is something you can't just shut down. You got to keep consuming the
Please
power.
keep on going on this.
Yeah.
Any participants?
So in Delhi, there are power plant is shut down because of the pollution, because of the coal power plant we have in city in Delhi. Supreme Court now ordered to shut it down because of the pollution.
Yeah, but when you shut it down, they themselves complain saying that there is no cooling. Why I'm being burnt without air conditioning. So you can't have that way. You can't have this. You can't have the cake and eat it too. So if you want cooling, you got to produce power. Second law of thermodynamics simply says that.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello?
Sir, the wheat straw from the Punjab and Haryana can be used for power generation. Sir, instead of farmers are burning their wheat straw and it produces a lot of pollution.
That is already being done, isn't that? Because the biomass is nothing but only that. A lot of biomass is being used, and they are making briquettes and burning in biomass boilers and all that. Because non-conventional energy has funded so many projects, and so many places they are using this one power generation.
Okay.
You can use it. But again, the biggest problem of burning that one is the residue, ash. Ash has lots of silica content in it. So how do you dispose of that ash? That's it. That's an issue. See, most of the thermopower plants are the same because the carbon burns completely. We don't have a problem. The ash that is coming in, of course, the carbon dioxide that it produces. Because coal is not 100% coal, isn't 100% carbon. It's only about 60-70% is carbon. The rest of it is junk.
No, I'm telling you about coal, sir. We are burning wheat straw.
Wheat straw also has got a lot of silicon in it, a lot of other chemicals. It's not just only carbon.
No, it produces ash, sir. But ash is nothing but your trace elements that can be used as a fertilizer.
Not all, my friend. Not all. There is a lot of junk that is coming. It's not good for as a fertilizer.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, you can't use it. The residue is a lot of silicon and other elements are there, which actually not silicon-based compound, other compound. Not everything is a fertilizer. In fact, it erodes the soil quality. Actually, if now ordinary farmer, if you ask them, they will tell you what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Okay.
They have a lot of knowledge about it.
Even in the ash content, then that from power plant, we make the fly ash bricks, but it is now found that it has the radioactive material. So using of that fly ash brick is also a problem now because of the radioactivity.
Sir, everywhere the laws of thermodynamics work. You want something, you got to forego something. कुछ लेकर पा रहा है, कुछ पाकर देना लेना है. Unless you give something, you can't give something. If you can't win. I told you in the beginning, you can never win against nature. You have to learn to live with whatever nature gives. That is optimal way of living. Like Lord saying that "Pakar khona hai, khokar pana hai." That famous Mukesh song is there. That is nothing but thermodynamics. Unless you give heat, you can't produce work. Unless you give work, you can't produce cooling. Simple. We looked at both morning and evening today.
Any other participants?
There's some question need to demonstrate before going ahead. It must be cost effective. I completely agree. Yes, everything is cost effective. Engineering is only, like I said, I keep on telling my students here, 50% of engineering is common sense. Invariably, you know what is right and what is wrong intuitively. Then 30% you read real engineering, that is domain knowledge in order to design, construct, and all this. and 20% is actually the remaining 20% is actually cost. An engineer is a good engineer only when he has got feet on the ground and keeps on looking at the dollars or rupees before actually he goes on to on a flying trip to I have got a super duper heat exchanger, super duper compressor, and all that. If he got a super duper compressor, but he's going to call me $100 million, they're sorry, no one is going to fit it. Yes, I completely agree. All this technology, what I have mentioned, we don't know. First, actually, when we develop, we don't look at the cost of it. Okay, now again, that takes me back to when Faraday invented electricity way back in 1850. He was staying in a hostel. The hostel, what everyone says that you seem to have invented something called electricity. What is the use of it? Because in those days, no one knew what is the cost of electricity. Now, then he said, it's him, no, don't worry. One day you are going to tax and make money out of that. And you know how much of tax you pay on electricity. That's actually one of the main source of income for the state governments. That's how they make money. And similarly, when the automobile was introduced, everyone thought, how many horses is it going to do? That's how the word horsepower, how many horses is going to replace? Now today, can you ever really think of living without automobile today? So all these things, yes, I agree. Initial about 100 years back or 120 years back, a car was a luxury. Maybe even 50 years back, the refrigerator was a luxury. Now even every person, even in a hut, you find refrigerators today because that's become part and parcel of this. Yes, cost is very important. I do agree with that.